Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. As always, thank you for joining us. Now, Democrats have been trying to dine out on that anti-Puerto Rican joke at the Madison Square Garden rally, hoping they're really going to capitalize on that, thinking, well, Trump's going to take a big hit among Puerto Rican voters. Well, this was Puerto Rico's shadow senator speaking today.
I strongly and fully support and endorse Donald J. Trump to be our 47th president, to make America great again, and of course, to make Puerto Rico shine again.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, they thought all these indictments on the lawfare was going to crush Trump, and it didn't. But a joke told by a comedian was going to get... These people can't be taught. But another narrative being trampled on, but, you know, certainly that won't stop Kamala from telling lies tonight. In a desperate attempt to reignite what is clearly waning enthusiasm for her campaign, exactly 1 week before the election, Harris is going to speak to a very large crowd gathered on the Ellipse across from the South Lawn of the White House. We're going to bring it to you live. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, he's rallying in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which we'll also cover. But first, return to rage. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, think about the contrast here. Trump packs the Garden to the rafters. He goes to a liberal city to do so. But for her closing pitch, she heads to the most pro-Democrat place in the United States, here in Washington, D.C. How brave is she? Well, tonight she'll tell us that it's time to turn the page. Finally, I agree with Kamala Harris. It is time to turn the page from the Biden era of decline and demonization that she will continue, and to an era of prosperity and peace, from their agenda of division and hate to a new time of unity and optimism. With her, it's not turning the page, it's a return to rage.
She's running on a campaign of demoralization and really a campaign of destruction. But really, perhaps more than anything else, it's a campaign of hate. It's a campaign of absolute hate.
Of course, Harris is also going to go after Trump on abortion, because Democrats think so little of women, they reduce them to one issue. So all you women out there tonight, forget the nightmare cost of living, what you pay at the pump, what you pay at groceries, insurance, all of that Harris helped create. Forget the open border that the girls and women have been brutalized under. Forget all that. Just focus on that one issue. Now, for the party that claims to cherish democracy, they sure don't like it when it comes to abortion. Now, all the Supreme Court did was return the issue to the states. And reportedly, there are more abortions happening now than they happened before the Dobbs decision was even handed down. So how does any of this make sense? The truth is, she doesn't trust the people to make their own decisions on this or any issue. Beyond abortion, her party wants the federal government to dictate the outcome on every major issue, from boys playing on girls' sports teams to the type of car that you get to drive. They don't trust you. And really, they don't even like you. So don't buy the abortion hustle. It's lame. And, of course, there are going to be more dire warnings tonight about how Trump will try to jail his political enemies. Hello? They've been trying to put Trump in prison since he came down the golden escalator 9 years ago. They hoped the lawfare, by the way, would be an insurance policy to prevent Trump from running again. And, of course, she's accusing Trump of wanting revenge and retribution, huh? And let's not forget, Biden and Harris's flunkies actually did put Trump's former aides in jail. Steve Bannon, he just released today. Peter Navarro was only released in July. Who out there thinks that they would have been prosecuted had they not worked for Trump? And if you think that, then I have some sand to sell you in the Mojave Desert. Now, let me say this, and I want to say this as clearly as possible tonight. We've got 1 week out to this election. Everything Kamala is saying tonight is a lie, all of it. It is a classic case of psychological projection. Donald Trump was president of the United States for 4 years. I've known him for about 25 years. I spoke to him at least once a month during that time he was president, and at no time did he ever try to weaponize the DOJ against his opponents. And he didn't use the military or the FBI against his opponents either. Never did it. So this speech of Kamala's will basically be a replay of Biden's Independence Hall speech. Remember that? With the creepy red lights? Biden, ultra MAGA is coming for you, kids. Now, it was nasty. It was hate-filled. It was laughed at. It convinced no one. Talk about divisive. But, of course, no more so than the Hitler Nazi fascist card that Kamala and company are desperately playing now.
Kamala intends to conflict and keep this misery going, and she's going to keep it going as long as she can, because that's the only way she can get elected. She's going out and only criticizing, talking about Hitler and Nazi, and because her record's horrible. Her borders are the worst in the history of the world.
That's an understatement, I think, if it's possible in the history of the world to be an understatement. Now, perhaps my favorite part of Kamala's speech tonight is her promising to bring Republicans to the table and even to give them positions in her administration. Okay. As if a single Trump supporter thinks that Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger count. They're worse than liberals. They're liberals who want perpetual war. So tonight is simply Kamala Harris's latest attempt to answer the Trump juggernaut. But his rise is based on his record, the economy, the border, his foreign policy. And he promises a return to peace and prosperity, which is pretty credible because he's done it before. But the animating theme of Kamala Harris's campaign is hating on Donald Trump and throwing a little abortion for good measure. It's toxic fear-mongering. And her economic plan, if you can even call it a plan, it's a joke, price controls and tired cliches. The fact is, she's been trying to play catch-up with Trump for several weeks now. Trump's dominating the male vote because he treats them like actual human beings. He offers them real solutions to their top concerns. But Kamala's either sending the Obamas out to lecture men, pay attention to women's health, or you're a sexist, or she's trying to pander to them with stupid stage moments like this.
Yeah. Oh, we have microphones and I was listening to everything. I didn't realize that. Okay. So, well,
You'll
now
bleep
you tell
my
us.
F words.
We just told all the family secrets.
Two empty pantsuits having a beer. They're going to need shots after Tuesday night. All right. Meanwhile, Trump seemed totally at ease, remember, when he went on Joe Rogan's show for 3 hours or at the McDonald's drive-thru. It just seemed like classic Trump. But you knew Harris was in trouble when she even tried to co-opt Trump's positions on everything from degree requirements for federal workers to no taxes on tips. Copycat. Now, even the rally at the Ellipse, when you think about it, oh, yeah, that was Trump's January 6th rally. But I half expect her to wear a red tie and a navy Brioni suit. It's almost as pathetic as her freedom message tonight. Democrats are the true guarantors of liberty. Really? Was that what it was all about when the Biden administration was pressuring tech companies to censor certain types of speech? Was that freedom? The only freedom that Kamala will protect involves maybe pot, porn, and abortion. And the only Democratic outcome they'll accept is when it's an outcome they like. Just a few short months ago, they were suing to kick Trump off the ballot in states. And they would have done so had the Supreme Court not slapped him down 9-0. Again, the guarantors of democracy. They tried to sue him and kick him off the ballot. Come on, that's it. Harris's closing argument is just another cynical, tired retread of the same lies that we've been hearing for years. They haven't worked so far, and if President Trump wins next week, the Democrats will have to throw away this entire shameful playbook and maybe start listening to the American people instead of constantly attacking them. And that's the angle.
So you just heard from Kamala Harris making a pretty dark and tedious final pitch to voters just 1 week before Election Day. The Harris campaign looks a lot different than it did this summer.
And understand, in this fight, as Tim Walz likes to point out, we are joyful warriors. Joyful warriors. Should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States of America. Never again. Never again. Never again.
That joy must have left its luggage in Chicago, because now that we're in the home stretch, Kamala's missing something.
It does suggest that your momentum has slowed. Do you feel like the race is slipping away?
I do not. And actually, and I agree with you. I think certainly polling is a measure, but to be frank, if I'd listened to polls, I would have never run for my first or second office. I wouldn't be here talking with you. And what I am seeing are in states such as South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, historic turnout. Historic turnout.
Yeah, historic Republican turnout. Republicans are winning the early vote in North Carolina and Georgia for the first time in history. Trump's inner circle telling Axios, we've never had data that looks this good. Trump's confident, and Harris claiming she's confident, but has a lot of problems. When she said she wouldn't do anything differently than Biden, she really meant it, because she's even campaigning like Biden. We're starting to realize the Joy campaign, people were just joyful she wasn't Joe. Her closing message was Joe's message. Trump's a dictator. That message wasn't working for Joe. That's why he got whacked. But for some reason, they think it's working for Kamala. Kamala's aides are increasingly hopeful that the campaign's attempts to cast Trump as a fascist will carry Ms. Harris to a narrow triumph. Everything in the country is more dangerous, disorganized, and expensive. And Kamala Harris claims she's running on the future, but can't stop talking about a European dictator who's been dead for 80 years. Kamala talks about Hitler more than a history professor. She says she's the candidate of change, and she's giving her closing speech in Washington, D.C., at the Ellipse, the site of Trump's Jan 6th speech. A week before the election, and Kamala isn't in the battlegrounds, she's in D.C. talking about January 6th. And even though she's giving the speech right in front of the White House, Biden's not invited.
Mr. President, will you be watching the Vice President's speech tonight?
I will.
Why are you not attending? It's right there on the ellipse.
Because it's for her. This is her night.
What do you expect to hear out of her tonight? What's the closing message from the Vice President?
I'll let you hear it first.
If you can squint, you can see Biden poking his head out of the window of the White House, but the nurses won't let him leave. And he couldn't come anyway because Kamala took out a restraining order on him. Biden's not allowed within 100 yards of the vice president. Every time they're seen together, she loses votes. And tonight's speech isn't helping.
Donald Trump has told us his priorities for a second term. He has an enemies list of people he intends to prosecute. Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls, quote, the enemy from within.
Every politician has an enemies list. The only difference is that Trump hasn't prosecuted anybody on his. Biden and Harris have an enemies list, yeah. And they've prosecuted Trump, Bannon, Navarro, Rudy, Weiselberg. I could go on for an hour with the amount of Republicans they locked up. Biden, just last week, while he was campaigning for Harris, said we have to lock Trump up. Trump's running for president to stay out of prison because he's on Biden and Harris's enemies list. He's literally running against a prosecutor. But here she is giving herself a nice makeover.
Here is my pledge to you. I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to make your life better. I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress. I pledge to listen to experts, to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make.
Kamala Harris was the most radical left senator in the entire Senate. She reached across the aisle? Never. She never even did anything in the Senate. What legislation did she get passed? Nothing. Kamala's seeking common sense solutions. What is she talking about? She opened the border, emptied the prisons, broke the bank, and put boys in girls' locker rooms. Here's a common sense solution to stop inflation. Stop spending so much money. She's campaigning on spending even more money. She's running on solving the problems she created and couldn't solve while she had the power. And what experts is Kamala going to listen to? The experts who said shut the schools down for 2 years? Or the ones who said if we get vaxxed, we can't catch or spread COVID? Biden promised unity too. And all he did was unify the country against them. Trump saw Kamala's speech coming from a mile away. It's nothing new.
Today we're going to talk about the real character of Kamala, and a person who has no remorse for the anguish she's inflicted upon families all across America. On the contrary, I have to tell you, Kamala intends to conflict and keep this misery going, and she's going to keep it going as long as she can, because that's the only way she can get elected. She's going out and only criticizing, talking about Hitler and Nazi, and because her record's horrible. Her borders are the worst in the history of the world. Millions of Americans are lying awake at night, worried about how they'll pay their bills because Kamala wrecked their family finances.
Democrats are secretly agreeing with Trump that Kamala's fascist attacks are backfiring because American voters want to hear about the future. Democrats are asking, we're going to shame people rather than give people a reason to get people off their couches to vote? I don't see us moving anyone over with that message. It's risky to go negative because sometimes independents don't like negativity, is what Democrats in Michigan are mumbling. Local anchors from Michigan are asking Kamala about the issues Kamala refuses to mention.
What's your message to Michigan voters in terms of the economy? We have auto workers who are being laid off and those who fear that they might be laid off. The average person can't afford groceries or their rent. And recent polls in Michigan show that Michigan voters believe that Donald Trump would do a better job with handling the economy and bringing jobs back. What do you say to that?
Well, let's start with this. I come from the middle class, and I'll never forget where I come from. My mother worked very hard. She, by the time I was a teenager, was able to save up for our first home. And I understand.
Kamala hasn't put any thought into you or what you're going to do with all the problems she heaped on you, because she spends every waking hour thinking about one man, not Doug, Donald. She played the YMCA before she took the stage tonight. Now, if you were running against Hitler, would you be trolling him and blasting his playlist? She's silly. The fascist closing message isn't designed to win. It's designed to justify their resistance if they lose. Opposing a so-called fascist in the White House gives the left a license to do whatever it wants. Lie, cheat, steal, riot, investigate, impeach, maybe even something worse. And they can frame every exercise of presidential authority as a fascist takeover. Trump fires someone, which he has every right to do. He's a dangerous tyrant who must be stopped. Trump starts deporting illegals, which is what the country wants, internment camps. And AOC starts crying and scratching ICE agents' eyes out in front of the cameras. Trump's Justice Department opens an investigation into shady Democrat campaign fundraising, suspicious ballot harvesting, insider trading. See, he's locking up his political enemies just like we warned. Any executive order Trump signs, just like all the presidents before him, it's going to be seen through the prism of a savage king abusing his power and destroying democracy. The dictator on day one hoax is their insurance policy, just like Russia was. So if they lose, they have an excuse to investigate and decapitate his presidency. This isn't even a well-thought-out strategy. The Kamala campaign is just listening to what they see on MSNBC. Even Bill Clinton, the Bernie bros, their own super PAC. They're like, Madam Vice President, you might want to focus on the American people and how you're going to make their lives better instead of blowing off steam about a blonde billionaire. If Trump wins with a diverse coalition and even wins the popular vote, he has a broad governing mandate. And this gives Democrats a reason to resist the will of the people. So this isn't over on Election Day. It'll only be the beginning.
And welcome to Hannity. And in just 1 week, official election results will be pouring in from across the country. We are in the final stretch. Earlier today, I sat down with the 45th president of the United States for what will be my last interview with Donald Trump as a candidate. Take a look.
So you have this big event at Madison Square Garden. It went on for hours. I don't even know if you were there for the whole thing. I don't know what time you got there. I was told and made aware that you had no idea about this comedian who made comments.
I have no idea who he is. Somebody said there was a comedian that joked about Puerto Rico or something, and I have no idea who he was. Never saw him, never heard of him, and don't want to hear of him. But I have no idea. They put a comedian in, which everybody does. You throw comedians in. You don't vet them and go crazy. It's nobody's fault. But somebody said some bad things. Now, what they've done is taken somebody that has nothing to do with the party, has nothing to do with us, said something, and they try and make a big deal. But I don't know who it is. I don't even know who put him in. And I can't imagine it's a big deal. I've done more for Puerto Rico than any president, I think, that's ever been president.
We'll have more on that issue and much more. Part one of my exclusive interview moments away. But first, we do have a message for Donald Trump's opponent tonight. Now, earlier, Kamala Harris, well, she's not campaigning in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, or any other battleground state. Instead, she is spending time in a place near and dear to her heart, a city filled of lobbyists, government workers, bureaucrats, politicians, far left fake news journalists. A city that Biden carried by more than 92% of the vote, and a city where Kamala feels right at home. And, of course, we are talking about the Washington swamp. And just moments ago, the anointed Democratic candidate made her so-called closing argument at a rally near the White House. And just a few metro stops away, well, violent crime is raging through Washington, D.C. It is one of the most dangerous cities in America. But Kamala didn't talk about crime in tonight's speech. The nation's capital is also struggling with rising homelessness and a record high cost of living. Kamala didn't say much about inflation or the housing crisis she didn't deal with for 4 years. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. is also suffering from a massive influx of Harris, Biden, unvetted illegal immigrants. But according to Kamala, this is Donald Trump's fault, of course. Take a look.
I will work with Democrats and Republicans to sign into law the border security bill that Donald Trump killed.
Kamala told a lot of lies tonight, and that was the amnesty bill that would allow millions of illegal immigrants into the country every single year. That was not a border security bill by any stretch of the imagination. And that wasn't the only lie from tonight's speech. So let's expose these smears one by one. Here's Kamala lying about abortion, birth control, and IVF. Take a look.
Trump's not done. He would ban abortion nationwide, restrict access to birth control and put IVF treatments at risk, and force states to monitor women's pregnancies. Just Google Project 2025 and read the plans for yourself.
That's like a triple lie in one paragraph. Here's a headline from CBS, quote, Trump says he would veto a federal abortion ban. He supports IVF. And by the way, does not call for restrictions on birth control, the opposite of what Harris claimed tonight. He is also totally opposed to limiting any of this in any way, has called on the federal government to help fund IVF, as a matter of fact. And by the way, it is not Trump's Project 2025. He's not affiliated with it in any way, knows nothing about it, has never even read the so-called project. Kamala Harris is a liar, and her next lie was about Social Security and Medicare. Let's scare the old people, as per usual. Take a look.
Donald Trump has a different approach. He tried to cut Medicare and Social Security every year he was president.
Okay, here's the truth. Donald Trump says he will, quote, never do anything to cut benefits. In fact, benefits went up under Donald Trump in his first term. She's lying again. She also blatantly lied when she mentioned unity and bringing the country together. In reality, she and her surrogates are spending almost all their time, all their energy smearing, slandering her political rivals and playing political games. In fact, just seconds before promising to bring the country together, here's what she had to say about her political opponent. Wow, this is really unity, if I've ever heard it.
America, this is not a candidate for president who is thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power. Donald Trump has spent a decade trying to keep the American people divided and afraid of each other. That is who he is.
That was like 10 lies in one paragraph. Amid all the smears and the slander and besmirchment and lying, this was a robotic, uninspiring, meaningless speech. She claims she will represent all Americans, even those who don't vote for her, days after she and her acolytes were out there calling everyone supporting Donald Trump a Nazi and a fascist. She promised to always tell the truth, even when it's difficult. But she lied over and over again, didn't she, about inflation being transitory, the border being secure, about how comfortable she was with the Afghanistan withdrawal, and about Joe Biden's cognitive state. She says she will never denigrate or dishonor those in the military. She called the Afghan withdrawal a success. And when she is asked if she would have done anything differently or had any regrets from Joe Biden, she could not say that she regretted any decision, including the decision to allow our enemies to take over the security outside that air base in Afghanistan. Her inability to admit to her mistakes and failures that led to deaths, and it dishonors the service of so many. What we are witnessing is a failing campaign and an attempt to try and regain the post-DNC bump a week before the election as they see more and more states falling out of reach. The desperation and panic is palpable. Still, this election, I always warn everybody, assume that your vote will decide the outcome of this election. And it's very close on paper, but the Harris campaign is clearly running scared. Today, we did learn that the campaign is now pulling millions of dollars in ad spending from North Carolina amid a, quote, surge of Republican early voters. There has been a similar surge across all the battleground states, and Trump is also outperforming expectations in national polling. And according to the most accurate pollster of 2020, Atlas Intel, Donald Trump is now up by nearly 2 points. Now, the same poll shows Trump ahead in all but one battleground state. And again, this will all mean nothing if you don't bank your vote. I voted Sunday. But you can still take joy in knowing that these polls are causing epic meltdowns on the left. Take a look.
Here's the warning. You all have set it up. But let me take it a step further, please, if I may. This is called normalization.
Yes.
This is the descent into fascism, if we so choose.
They think, okay, we've already seen that movie. I can live with it for 4 more years. But it's not the same movie. You know, it's the sequel to Scream, where it's just that much bloodier. And, you know, there are people, I mean, you're a journalist. You and I might be sharing a cell in 6 months from now.
The stakes literally are life and death for every woman in America.
And he wants to start internment camps. And that's what we are busy talking to every voter. He's telling you what he's going to do. Believe him.
Internment camps?
Yes. He has talked internment camps. You know what, Jake? You may have to visit me in one. I get worried enough when he talks about what he's going to do to his political enemies.
And it gets worse. Remember irredeemable deplorables and bitter Americans clinging to their God, guns, Bibles, religion from Obama? Yeah, well, now President Biden, well, he couldn't stay out of the fray. He referred to Donald Trump's supporters as, quote, garbage. Watch.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is just supporters.
Coming back.
The only garbage I see out there, just Trump supporters. Now, remember, according to Kamala, it's Donald, he's the one that's fanning the flames of division. Take a look.
I talked with Governor Walz yesterday. Okay. He compared Trump's rally on Sunday to that of one of the Nazi rallies in the 30s at Madison Square Garden. Do you compare that? Do you find that a similar comparison?
Listen, this election is in 7 days, and I think the American people have a very clear choice. And on the one hand, you have Donald Trump, who is constantly fanning the flames of division and hate, who is trying to have the American people point their fingers at each other, or my leadership, which is founded on a lived and experience that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Yeah, let's double down on Nazi, racist, fascist. It might be the clearest example of gaslighting and hypocrisy that we'll ever see. At the end of the day, only one question really matters. Are you better off than you were under Donald Trump? And so tonight, while Kamala is spending time with her friends in the Washington swamp, the former president, oh, look right there. He's in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in front of another massive crowd. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.